It's April 8th here in Seoul, and I'm Kim Dami. We begin with the stories making the headlines at this hour, starting with South Korea's snap presidential election date. Acting President Han Duck-soo will formally announce June 3rd as the election day this morning. And that means the election campaign will begin on May 12th, with early voting to take place on May 29th and 30th. U.S. President Donald Trump is now threatening to slap an additional 50% tariff on China, expressing his willingness to negotiate tariffs with all countries but China. And countries around the world are actively reaching out to Trump ahead of the April 9th reciprocal tariffs. And the EU is now also offering to remove tariffs on all industrial goods from the U.S. The government is likely to confirm the date of an early presidential election in June. This after now former President Yoon Suk Yeol was removed from office last Friday due to his December martial law declaration. We have our correspondent Oh Soo-young on the line. Good morning, Soo-young.
Good morning, Tammy.
So, Soo-young, so the highly anticipated early election date is more likely to be fixed in the next half hour or so, correct?
Yes, Tammy, that's exactly what we're expecting. But before we begin, we just heard some breaking news that the acting president and Prime Minister Han Duck-soo, he's just appointed the Constitutional Court Justice nominee Ma Eun-hyuk after months of controversy over his previous refusal to appoint the left-leaning nominee. He has now decided to appoint him, which is what the opposition party has been pushing for many weeks. And I'll be bringing you details about that later. But yes, getting back to the next presidential election, the 21st presidential election of Korea. Now, Han Duck-soo is expected to declare June 3rd as the day of an early presidential election. And that would come 4 days after former President Yoon Suk Yeol was removed from power on Friday. Now, under the Constitution, the date must be announced within 10 days of a presidential vacancy and at least 50 days before the votes. That means Han actually has until next Monday to settle on a date. But there's been a lot of pressure to quickly fill the leadership vacuum as former President Yoon was suspended from his duties for almost 4 months throughout his impeachment trial. An election on Tuesday, the 3rd of June, would mark the latest possible day within the 60-day window set out by the Constitution. And this, of course, would be aimed at ensuring the people's right to vote. Normally, presidential elections in Korea are held on a Wednesday, but in the case of early elections, if they're triggered by a presidential vacancy, then there aren't any separate regulations concerning the day of the week. In 2017, for example, an early presidential election took place also after the ousting of a former president, President Park Geun-hye. And the election date was announced 5 days after the Constitutional Court upheld her impeachment, and the vote itself took place exactly 60 days following the ruling.
Soo-young, you will have to update us on the Prime Minister and Acting President Han Duck-soo's appointment on Justice nominee Ma Eun-hyuk. For the meantime, we are waiting for him to announce the exact date for the election, June 3rd, likely to be the big day. What comes after the date is set?
Well, it's going to be an incredibly compact campaigning period. I mean, if the presidential election is held on June 3rd, then candidate registrations, they're going to begin on May 10th and run for 2 days, so until May 11th. And the official campaigning period then would start the next day for just over 3 weeks until June 2nd, which would be the day before the vote. During this time, there are going to be televised interviews, debates hosted by electoral authorities. Overseas Koreans must register to vote 40 days before Election Day, according to the National Election Commission, and ballots for them will open from May 20th to the 25th. Now, early voting will start the weekend before for 2 days on May 29th and 30th. In an early election, the winner has to assume presidential duties immediately without a transition committee. In 2017, former President Moon Jae-in began his presidential duties the day after the vote. So right after the Election Commission confirmed his victory on May 10th. Now, once the election date is confirmed, the National Election Commission is expected to release the full election schedule.
I see. Once confirmed, we will bring our viewers the latest, of course. Thank you, Soo-young, for the coverage. U.S. President Donald Trump has made it clear that there is no change of a foreplan for his reciprocal tariffs. He further warned of an extra 50% tariff on China, while opening the door for negotiations with other trading partners. Our Moon Hae-ryun reports.
U.S. President Donald Trump confirmed that the sweeping tariffs announced last week will be rolled out without delay and threatened further import taxes on China. Taking to social media on Monday, he said that Washington could impose an additional 50% tariff on Beijing unless it withdraws its retaliatory 34% tariffs on U.S. goods. The escalation of the trade war between the two countries brings the total rate levied on Chinese imports to 104%. This is expected to have a staggering impact, as China was the second largest trading partner with the U.S. last year. Trump also warned that unless Beijing accepts his demands, its negotiations with the U.S. will come to a standstill. Meanwhile, negotiations with other countries are due to begin immediately. South Korea is among the countries that may engage in negotiations with the U.S., as its Minister for Trade is scheduled to meet with the U.S. Department of Commerce and the Office of the United States Trade Representative in the coming days. Talking with reporters at the airport ahead of his flight to Washington, Minister Chung In-kyo discussed Seoul's strategy for the upcoming talks, including increasing LNG imports from the U.S.
In order to reduce U.S. tariffs, we need to reduce the U.S. trade deficit, which, from our perspective, is a trade surplus. Since it is difficult to reduce our exports, we must increase our imports. In that regard, we have been reviewing various packages to help resolve the trade balance issue.
Starting from Wednesday, the U.S. will levy rates exceeding the 10% baseline for reciprocal tariffs. For South Korea, a total tariff rate of 25% will apply. During a meeting with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, Trump said that these levies will be implemented as planned, but he was open to fair deals.
We have many countries that are coming to negotiate deals with us, and they're going to be fair deals, and in certain cases they're going to be paying substantial tariffs. There'll be fair deals.
This marks a shift from earlier statements which said that there would be no negotiations for the time being. During interviews with various media outlets, White House officials said that such deals would need to be really great for American manufacturing and farmers, and countries would need to do more than just lowering their tariffs for relief. Moon Hae-ryun, Arirang News.
And with rising trade tensions, South Korean authorities are rolling out measures to support local businesses. During an economic ministerial meeting on Tuesday, Finance Minister Choi Sang-mok pointed out that concerns are rising about the impact on domestic industries of the higher-than-expected U.S. reciprocal tariffs. As a result, Seoul will be allocating approximately 3 to 4 trillion Korean won, or over $2 billion in a supplementary budget next week to stabilize supply chains and provide support for SMEs. In another meeting with finance chiefs, Choi called for close monitoring of the volatile stock market in response to trade uncertainties. And countries around the world are moving quickly to talk Trump out of the upcoming reciprocal tariffs that are about to be effective in the coming day. Lee Seung-ja has this report.
After the announcement of sweeping reciprocal tariffs imposed by U.S. President Donald Trump last week, countries are looking to negotiate a deal before April 9th, when the tariffs go into effect. The European Union, in the hopes of striking a deal with the U.S., said Monday that it has offered 0-for-0 tariffs for industrial goods. The announcement was made by European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, who stressed that such deals were done successfully with other countries in the past. The U.S. and the EU were close to removing tariffs on all industrial goods a decade ago during the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership talks, but this was ultimately scrapped by Trump in his first term. In response to Trump's automobile tariffs, the UK government said Monday it would relax electric vehicle sales targets in order to help its domestic auto industry. The ban on selling new gas and diesel cars will still come into effect in 2030, but automakers will now have more flexibility on annual targets. Currently, 28% of new cars sold in the UK in 2025 must be electric, as the target will rise annually until 2030. However, automakers will be given more freedom on how they meet their annual targets. This means that if they don't sell enough EVs in 1 year, they can make it up by selling more next year. Also, a penalty of £15,000 or $19,000 per vehicle sold that does not meet the latest emissions standards will be cut to just over $15,000. Meanwhile, U.S. President Donald Trump and Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba held phone talks on Monday, where the Japanese leader voiced his disappointment over the tariffs. Ishiba told Trump that Japan has been the biggest investor in the U.S. for 5 straight years, and that his tariff policies could hurt Japanese companies and their investments. During the 25-minute call, the two leaders also agreed on constructive dialogue on the matter, with Ishiba sending a team to negotiate with the U.S. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
So Japan is one of the first countries to ask Trump to rethink his tariffs. Will any of the at least 50 countries looking to negotiate with the U.S. be able to get out of Trump's tariffs? Let's turn to Professor Kim Won this morning. Welcome.
Good morning.
Why are some countries like India and Indonesia choosing to talk it out when countries like China and Canada are responding with retaliatory tariffs?
Well, the choice between negotiation and retaliation depends a lot on the economic situations as well as the beliefs that they have about their counterparties. So in this case, the U.S. sent a signal about fixing this trade deficits, otherwise we will impose the tariffs, and it's a very strong signal. And then this type of the signaling game typically considered in economics say about 2 possible outcomes. One is separating case where one country imposes tariff and the other actually is negotiates, and the other type is tariff war, meaning imposing tariffs to each other very heavily. And typically one of the decision factors between these two is probably this length of this type of the war or the period of this retaliation. So in case of China, because of this perennial sort of trade imbalances, they know that it's not going to be a short term, so they're likely to actually into this war, while the other countries think that it's more likely short term and then leading to agreement. So there's a chance that it's going to have more negotiating type of strategy.
Trade deficit is a term that we have to, pay our attention to. That is why Trump is so firm on not willing to make a deal with China unless that trade deficit disappears. The question is, how can that be solved using Trump's method then?
So I looked at the past data, and then the U.S. trade imbalance with China really increased and started, I think, in 1990s. Before, I think the biggest country of the trade deficit against the U.S. was Japan. After the Plaza Accord, if we remember, in 1985 to 7, by pushing the Japanese yen's value, I think it was kind of fixed, and then there were actually some reductions in trade imbalances, and then it started going up with the emergence of the Chinese cheap products actually imported. So, of course, it benefits a lot of the U.S. consumers, but then I think, as we know now, the trade imbalance problem is very severe. So I guess the tariff actually is going to be kind of something similar to the currency, devaluation or appreciation type of things.
Sure.
And I think that Trump is looking at really old time, in 1930s or something, to actually have the kind of some nice effects of the restoring the trade imbalance. I don't know how well it's going to work given this globalization of all the parts inside of any products, but at least I think it's going to have some impact similar to the currency devaluation.
But Trump's definitely betting on that. Now, this is just an opinion released by the Wall Street Journal. But apparently, according to that opinion, Trump's global trade war is a strategic gift to Chinese President Xi Jinping in a way that Trump's trade partners, around the world could turn to China for cooperation. Will China be a winner here? What do you think?
Well, I also read that article and the opinion part. I doubt a bit. I mean, there's clearly some effects, but I don't think it's going to be that easy for China to convince other trading partners, because if you look at the trading balance between China and other countries, it's also similar in that they're actually making huge surplus. So if this is going to be resolved with the U.S. for somehow, I think, partnering with especially the Europe, it's going to be the next turn that they have to fight with Europe. I don't think this is going to basically just lead to the clear winning system. Anyway, tariff war always leads to loss at the end of the day. So, but I think the U.S. clearly has very pinpointed target against China. So I'm not sure if this strategical alliance with the Europe is going to really work. But there's a point I can see, right?
And I'm sure Trump is not going to just sit there, easily let China become a winner. But the question is, how will he make sure that China doesn't become a winner here?
Yeah, so I think, clearly, as you already mentioned in the very beginning, they already started threatening, slapping with another 50%, amounting to 100% or something. I know it's a bit too much, but anyway, so they'll just keep doing this. So I don't know how things will end, but clearly this usually leads to some sudden end sometimes, or it's going to have really big impact, and already business leaders in the U.S. start making comments about this. So there will be some mediations, but for the time being, it's going to be very unclear. So clearly there will be some, types of the tariffs or regulations very heavy against China, and China is going to have some negative impacts because at the end of the day, yes, China is somewhat sustainable, but if we look at their growth patterns, it's been very driven by exports. So without, the exports, they're not going to, grow, unlike, the other cases like in the U.S. So I don't think it's going to be a very positive case for China. For the time being, they may have some silver lining, though.
Sure. Well, there's that for China. For us, South Korea, the trade minister is heading to the U.S. once again this week to sort things out with the Trump administration. Now, what kind of strategy or approach do you think South Korea should take to convince U.S. officials at this time? We've tried multiple times, as you know.
To be honest, I don't know, but at least I think that reducing the information gap is very important. I remember in the inaugural speech of the President Trump, I think he was talking about 4 times higher tariffs or non-tariff barriers or something. At least, both, the parties should be, both countries actually should have the symmetric information. So where this, number comes from, and this kind of things at least will reduce the information gaps so that there will be more negotiations. Second, clearly export part is not going to be all of a sudden changing, but then, import can increase. And at least I remember the South Korea has huge trade deficits against Japan or something. So if there are some ways in the short term to shift the import partners from Japan or other perennial the red deficit countries to U.S., I think the probably South Korean government should actively pursue that or show the effort.
All right, Professor Kim, thank you so much for connecting with us this morning. You enjoy your evening there.
Thank you.
And in other news, South Korea's current account stayed in the black for the 22nd month in a row in February. According to data from the Bank of Korea on Tuesday, the country logged a $7.2 billion current account surplus in the second month of the year. This marks a sharp increase from January surplus, thanks to the easing of disruptions caused by fewer working days during the Lunar New Year holiday the month before. It also comes as exports rose 3.6% compared to the previous month on a strong demand for computers, pharmaceuticals, cars, and IT equipment. Samsung Electronics, in its earnings guidance on Tuesday, estimated a first quarter operating profit of 6.6 trillion Korean won, or roughly $4.5 billion. The figure beats market expectations of around $3.5 billion, thanks to strong sales of the tech giant's latest flagship smartphones, despite being down 0.15% from a year earlier. The market had projected weaker earnings due to delayed shipments of its 5th-gen HBM chips and falling memory prices, but brisk sales of the Galaxy S25 launched in February pushed the results well above forecasts. Revenue rose nearly 10% on-year to 79 trillion won, or around $54 billion, close to an all-time high of 79.1 trillion won posted in the third quarter of last year. Firefighters are still trying to contain the wildfire burning in Hadong County, Gyeongbokgung Province. According to forestry authorities, a level 2 wildfire alert was issued after fire broke out at around noon on Monday. 36 helicopters were deployed to extinguish the fire, which affected 66 hectares of land. That's equivalent to around 92 soccer fields. Firefighters are struggling to fully contain the fire due to the wind. And meanwhile, donations collected for the recovery and support following last month's massive wildfires in South Korea's southeastern regions have reached 112.4 billion won, or over $76 million. The amount marks the largest ever collection of relief donations. Now, for those of you here in Seoul looking for a peaceful place to indulge in books, the King Study at Gyeongbokgung Palace is open as a small public library. Our Choi Soo-hyang tells us more.
Spring has arrived in Gyeongbokgung Palace. This part of the palace is called Jibokje, which means collecting precious jewels such as jade. It is connected with Parujong, an octagonal 2-story pavilion, and Hyopgildang Hall, showcasing a distinctive traditional architectural beauty. Inside the buildings, over 1,000 books fill the walls, and people look around and read. From April 2nd, the Jibokje has been opened as a small library. Here, visitors can read books, relax, and enjoy a moment of peace. The low ceilings gives visitors a cozy feeling and lets them see the beautiful tancheong, traditional Korean patterns, up close.
I think it's, peaceful, quiet. I feel lucky to be here, actually. So I choose other books like poem, just to see how it's writing.
We came here to enjoy the nice weather and also to learn more about our culture. The atmosphere is very calm and peaceful, and it feels like the perfect place to relax. We are having a really great time.
Since 2016, the Korea Heritage Service has opened this space for free to allow visitors to experience the palace more closely. This building was built in 1881 and was used by King Gojong as a study and to receive foreign envoys. It closed during the COVID-19 pandemic but reopened in 2022. Currently, this place has over 1,700 books related to the history of the Joseon dynasty and royal family.
It also offers books for children, foreign language translations, and rare resources such as the annals of the Joseon dynasty, which are not easily found elsewhere.
The office plans to hold programs such as Meet the Author events and book talks at the library. The Jibokje Small Library will be open until October 31st, except in July and August. Choi Soo-hyang, Arirang News.
Good morning, I'm Choi Ji-hee, and this is The World Now. U.S. President Donald Trump and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu convened at the White House to address a wide range of issues, including the Gaza conflict and Iran's nuclear ambitions. During their meeting on Monday at the Oval Office, Trump announced the initiation of direct talks with Iran over its nuclear program, with high-level discussions scheduled to begin on Saturday. Netanyahu expressed conditional support for the diplomatic efforts, stating that preventing Iran from obtaining nuclear capabilities through diplomatic means would be favorable. The leaders also discussed the ongoing conflict in Gaza, and Netanyahu highlighted Israel's commitment to securing the release of hostages held by Hamas and mentioned its ongoing military operations aimed at achieving this objective. The U.S. president once again expressed his desire for the U.S. to take over the Gaza Strip, saying that it would be a good thing. In the Middle East, a Palestinian-American teenager was fatally shot by Israeli forces in the occupied West Bank. On Sunday evening local time, a 14-year-old U.S. citizen from New Jersey was shot and killed near the town of Tormos Aya, northeast of Ramallah. According to the Israel Defense Forces, soldiers identified 3 individuals throwing rocks at civilian vehicles on a nearby highway. The IDF said its soldiers opened fire during a counterterrorism operation in the area after spotting 3 terrorist individuals who were throwing rocks at the highway. The mayor of Turmus Aya said 3 teenagers were shot on this day, resulting in 1 death and injuries to 2 others. The Palestinian Ministry of Health called the shooting an extrajudicial killing. India's northern regions, including the capital Delhi, are experiencing an unseasonal heat wave with temperatures soaring to unprecedented levels for early April. On Monday, Delhi recorded a maximum temperature of over 40 degrees Celsius, marking the highest of the season and exceeding the average temperature for this time of year by about 5 degrees. The India Meteorological Department has issued heat wave alerts for several northern and central states, forecasting temperatures to reach up to 42 degrees Celsius in the coming days. Authorities are advising residents to avoid heat exposure, stay hydrated, and wear lightweight clothing.
Cherry blossoms are in full bloom, lighting up the streets of the capital area. It's the perfect time to soak in the beauty of spring. But when you do head out, those in western regions and Gangwon province need to keep a face mask handy as the dust levels could spike at times. Meanwhile, a dry advisory has been reissued in parts of Gyeongsang-do and Daegu. And along with dry and windy conditions, even a small spark can quickly spread, so please be cautious. Then afternoon highs will rise to 19 degrees Celsius here in the capital, Daegu, Gyeongju, both seeing highs of 23 degrees. Then cloudy skies will turn much sunnier as the day goes on today. Then we'll see nationwide showers between tomorrow and Thursday, and there's another round of rain expected for this weekend as well. As we are expecting frequent rain this week, which could cause the cherry blossom petals to fall earlier than we'd like, you might want to head out sooner rather than later to catch the blossoms at their peak.
That's all we have for this morning. Thank you for watching.